Hi, I'm Phil Harbottle, and this is my 43rd video discussing 1950s British science fiction. In my earlier videos, I've shown and discussed several of the Vargo Statten and Volstead Gridban novels, but they've never been shown in their entirety, which you see here. I thought that some viewers might like to see these books, as many titles are nowadays difficult, some almost impossible, to find, and you need to win the lottery to buy them. Now, way back in 1968, I identified and described them all in my book, The Multi-Man. And my following capsule comments on the stories are taken from the pages of this book. I'll show it here. There, I start talking about a section of Vargo Statten stories, and you can see all of Vargo Statten titles listed with the capsule comments, which I'll be reading out in this video. Now let's take a look at all the 52 Vargo Statten book covers in chronological order. They were all first published by Sky Unlimited, with just the last 3 titles by their successors Dragon Press. Nearly all the covers were by Ron Turner, unless otherwise stated. Now, there's still a couple of half-wits on the internet who refer to Vargo Statten as a house name, but they were, of course, all entirely written by John Russell Fearn. It was Volstead Gridban that was the house name, first used by E.C. Tubb for 5 books, with Fearn then writing the remaining 12 novels, and all of the short stories by Statten and Gridban published in magazine form. But for this video, we're only concerned with the novels. We start with Fearn's first Sky and science fiction title before they put him under contract to continue the novel series as Vargo Statten. Operation Venus, 1950. 2 pilots battle against heavy odds in the Brazilian jungle where a madman has discovered a Venusian El Dorado. This was an expanded version of Fearn's short novel Queen of Venus, published in the November 1940 issue of the American pulp magazine Marvel Stories. And here we see the story. There we are. And it was illustrated by the great American artist Jack Kirby, which makes this magazine a prime collectible. Next, we go to Annihilation, 1950. Solar upheaval results in the failure of Earth's magnetic field with disastrous results to all life. The Microman, 1950. Research into eternal life opens the gateway to invasion and conquest from the sub-universe. Wanderer of Space, 1950. A fluke of the cosmos results in royal twinship, giving rise to interplanetary intrigue and adventure, a science fiction version of The Man in the Iron Mask. 2,000 years on, 1950. A modern man mentally projects himself into the future to become the linchpin of interplanetary politics and alien oppression. The opening chapter derives from Wanderer of Time as Polton Cross, 1944 magazine story. Inferno, 1950. Dick Blake returns from an expedition to Pluto to create an intrigue on the Earth of 2150, which only the super science of a lost Atlantean race can resolve. The Cosmic Flame, 1950. A natural cosmic lens is utilized to bring scorching death down from space to back up an ultimatum to the world. Nebula X, 1950. By an incredible fluke of physics, the long-dead alien woman is recreated, an utterly ruthless being who sets out to avenge her dead race. Basic plot structure taken from The Multillionth Chance by Fearn, 1946 magazine story. The Sunmakers, 1950. A dangerous experiment in physics opens the way for an onslaught from the 4th dimension. The first half of this novel is partly based on Metamorphosis by Fearn. 1937 magazine story. Before we move on, you'll remember that there was 2 editions of Nebula X. One is by Vargo Statten, and one is by Vargo Statten, and the same thing applied to the Sunmakers. Vargo Statten, Vargo Statten. Next we come to The Avenging Martian, 1951. A cosmic atrocity of the ancient past, the murder of the planet Mars by Venusians, is avenged by a descendant in the present day. Expanded and rewritten from Red Heritage by Fern, 1938 magazine story. Cataclysm, 1951. A fantastic interstellar adventure involving the destruction of this universe and the creation of another universe. A much expanded and completely rewritten version of a plot in The Devouring Tide is Poulton Cross, 1944 magazine story. The Red Insects, 1951, cover by Philip Mendoza. The World in Peril from Giant Termites. Subplots derived from Lords of 1916 by Fern, 1938 magazine story. Deadline to Pluto, 1951. To prevent a catastrophe from disrupting the planetary equilibrium, a spaceship races from Earth to Pluto to destroy a giant meteorite that has landed on the planet. A race against time and human nature. Petrified Planet, 1951. Returning from a maiden voyage to Venus, a man and wife find the Earth and everything on it suspended in a single moment of time. Born of Luna, 1951, cover by George Radcliffe. A life embryo brought from the moon matures into Raquillo, last of the moon's inhabitants, who overthrows an Earth dictator. The Devouring Fire, 1951. The advent of space travel plunges the world into a fiery doom. Renegade Star, 1951. The Earth is a spaceship plunging across the universe to avoid cosmic annihilation. A slightly expanded and rewritten version of The Blue Infinity by Fern, 1935 magazine story. The New Satellite, 1951. The destructive metamorphosis of the solar system is offset by an ancient alien race, revived from suspended animation. The Catalyst, 1951. A space explorer discovers on Mercury a substance which has the power to transmute anything into gold and causes interplanetary chaos. Inner Cosmos, 1952, shows how the experiments of a long-dead alien race lead to invasion from the microcosm and ultimately to life on Earth. Worlds Within by Fern, 1937 magazine story, incorporated with additional background material. Space Warp, 1952. A flaw in the ether results in a strange and terrifying metamorphosis in the nature of things on Earth. The Eclipse Express, 1952. The discovery of a translunar planet and the secrets of a vanished Selenite civilization incorporates in modified form much of 2 magazine stories. Eclipse Bears Witness, 1940, is Ephraim Winicki, and Valley of Pretenders, 1939, is Dennis Clive, with some new material. The Time Bridge, 1952. A girl is plunged into a state of non-time to be revived 500 years in the future and averts an interplanetary war. Expanded from Prisoner of Time as Poulton Cross, 1942 magazine story, but with a revised downbeat ending. Man from Tomorrow, 1952. A man travels back in time to the present to carry out historical research and is embroiled in human affairs. Previously published with a slightly more complex ending is Stranger in Our Midst by Fern, 1950 Toronto Star Weekly novel. The G-Bomb, 1952. A Fortean theme of Martian intrigue and world cataclysm. incorporates Last Secret Weapon as Potent Cross, 1941 magazine story, with the interplanetary angle as new material. Laughter in Space, 1952. Created by a catastrophe in a remote past, a cosmic cloud threatens to extinguish life on Earth. Expanded from Laughter Out of Space as Dennis Clive, 1940 magazine story. Across the Ages, 1952, cover by Norman Light. An ancient secret which destroyed Atlantis enables Jeffrey Collins to become a dictator of the solar system through future centuries. Previously published as Glimpse by Fern, 1952 Toronto Star Weekly novel without a twist ending. Bear with me for a moment whilst I reveal the further Vargo Statten titles. The Last Martian, 1952, cover by Norman Light, the novel of the ancient Martians, their disappearance, and the origin of cosmic rays and human life on Earth. Worlds to Conquer, 1952, cover by Norman Light. The discovery of the transmission of matter by radio leads to murder, avarice, and interstellar conflict. Decreation, 1952. Unconnected cover by Roger Davis. The semi-humorous adventures of a mental Superman. A new variant of Wells's Man Who Could Work Miracles. The Time Trap, 1952. Another unconnected cover by Roger Davis. An engrossing mixture of the admirable Crichton and the Fourth Dimension, as a group of men and women are faced with a grim struggle for survival in another plane of existence. Science Metropolis, 1952, cover by Philip Mendoza. Earth in Peril from Jovian Super Science. A greatly abridged version of the Fern magazine serial Zagrabud, 1937-38, which was the sequel to Liners of Time, 1935. To the Ultimate, 1952, cover by Gordon C. Davies. A novel seeking to explain all creation in a mathematical and mental framework. A reprint of the two Fern magazine stories, Mathematica and Mathematica Plus, 1936, with a new first chapter. Ultra Spectrum, 1953. An electrical freak makes Sydney Castle an outcast from humanity and the pawn of ruthless industrialists. The Dust Destroyer, 1953, cover by John Richards. An invention which destroys dust turns out to be a menace to mankind instead of a boon. Basic idea derived from The Man Who Stopped the Dust by Fern, 1934 magazine story. Black Wing of Mars, 1953, cover by John Richards. Earth is threatened with annihilation by a plague of Martian moths. Previously published as Winged Pestilence by Fern, 1953 Toronto Star Weekly novel. Man and Duplicate, 1953, cover by John Richards. An extraterrestrial becomes the duplicate of a millionaire playboy in order to facilitate his monstrous experiments in creating a new race. 0 Hour, 1953. If one could see into the future, would it be possible to avoid death by knowing of fatal accidents in advance? Previously published as Deadline by Fern, 1952 Toronto Star Weekly novel. The Black Avengers, 1953. A man unjustly banished to Jupiter's penal colony escapes to become the mastermind of a band of interplanetary outlaws and solves the mystery of the asteroids. Odyssey of 1953. Ward Jackson and his wife make an incredible journey to all 9 worlds of the solar system to pursue to the finish the cosmic mystery of the number 9. Pioneer 1953. From outer space came a mysterious message announcing that a hitherto humble Englishman had conquered space, flown to Venus, and was headed back to Earth. Expanded from He Conquered Venus's Fern, 1940 magazine story, with new material and a revised ending. The Interloper, 1953, cover by Philip Mendoza. An interplanetary war is decided by the intervention of scientists from outside the universe. Subplots derived from Face in the Sky as Thornton Air, 1939 magazine story. Man of Two Worlds, 1953. Walter Cardish is struck by strange electrical forces and becomes 2 people, one existing on Earth, whereas an exact duplicate of himself is transmitted to Mars, where Martian super scientists plan an invasion of his home planet. The Lie Destroyer, 1953. A scientist experiments on his own son with disastrous results both for the boy and society. Black Bargain, 1953. Every man, woman and child on Earth appears to be doomed through the poisonous influence of a cosmic cloud. When an alien woman arrives on Earth with the antidote mankind so desperately needs, but she demands a price. The Grand Illusion, 1953. Dudley Cornforth, gifted beyond the average with the gift of the gab, and also a jack-of-all-trades scientific and master of none, produces a master plan for a voyage to Mars. Wealth of the Void, 1954. The existence of a planetoid of almost solid gold gives rise to this story of human longings, of greed overcoming the finer sentiments, and behind it all, the implacable edicts of space, which all the skill and science of man cannot master. A Time Appointed, 1954. 3 men and a girl pit their intelligence and courage against the baleful power of a race of scientists long extinct, but who have left behind them a dreadful legacy. Subplots derived from Mystery of the Martian Pendulum as Thornton Air and Eos Steber, 1941 magazine story. I Spy, 1954. The secrets of the warlords, the immoralities of the masses, the hidden crimes, all lie exposed before the merciless, penetrating power of the invisible Z-ray. The Multi-Man, 1954. Emerging from a biological experiment comes the Multi-Man, a being capable of endless reproduction, but possessing none of the reservations of a natural human being. Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954, cover by John Richards. The novelisation of the film by Universal International Pictures, one of the monster films which were the vogue of the 50s, starring Julia Adams and Richard Carlson, tells of the discovery of the Gill Man, a survivor of another geological era, half man and half fish, in a lagoon off the Amazon River. The only Statten novel to have a hardcover reprint edition, as we see here. Now, despite my earlier video, dealers and auction houses online are still offering you copies of The Creature from the Black Lagoon hardcover as a 1954 first edition to justify their astronomical prices. But the paperback is the 1954 first edition, the hardcover is a 1955 reprint. But dealers don't need to lie to you. As the first hardcover, the book is still worth thousands of pounds today. 1,000-Year Voyage, 1954. A dictator and his retinue are banished on a journey of no returning into the deeps of space in the region of Alpha Centauri. Earth 2. 1955, cover by John Richards. Cosmic vagary involving the moon creates a race of beings identical to our own on a hidden planet. Then war breaks out. And now let's switch to the Volstead Gridban novels. You will see the first one, Moons for Sale, 1953. A scientific guinea pig matures to match his wits against the ruler of Mars in an interplanetary setting in the year 2000 AD. The Dino Depressant, 1953. An abnormal form of electrical energy plunges the world into total darkness, a darkness without heat or sound. Magnetic Brain, 1953. A Martian surgeon secretly endows the hitherto humble Earthman with the gift of being able to read the thoughts of his fellow mortals, and unwittingly aids him smash a Venusian conspiracy. Scourge of the Atom, 1953. Martin Bond explores the realm of ancestral memory, piecing together in an amazing manner the history of racial descent and the misuse of atomic power, and lives to see the end for the human race. The final chapter's denouement is derived from After the Atom by Fern, 1948 magazine story. A Thing of the Past, 1953. Mining explosions uncover a heritage from an 80 million year old prehistoric era existing in the bowels of the earth. First of two books featuring Herbert, the frisky dinosaur. Exit Life, 1953. The inhabitants of Earth mysteriously vanish, leaving behind nothing but their domestic chattels and strange malevolent scorch marks. The basic plot is similar to The World in Wilderness as Thornton Air, 1941 magazine story, but the development and explanation is completely different. The Master Must Die, 1953. When his life is threatened, Gyron de London, powerful industrialist of the year 1990, takes every precaution, even to sealing himself in a steel radiation-proof cube. But death overtakes him exactly as forecast. The first of two Adam Quirk impossible crime stories, science fiction detective mysteries. The Purple Wizard, 1953. Travelling backwards in time, a man and woman from 1967 find themselves in the darkest of medieval times, and the dim-witted folk of 828 AD resolve to execute them as necromancers. The Genial Dinosaur, 1954. Herbert, the benign dinosaur of A Thing of the Past, reappears to become the kingpin in overcoming Venusians bent on denuding Earth of its most valued possessions. The Frozen Limit, 1954. An unauthorized experiment in a deep freeze system of suspended animation threatens tragedy for the participants when the suspended girl cannot be restored to life. I Came, I Saw, I Wondered, 1954. A very amusing novel of a Martian who comes to Earth incognito that satirizes science fiction films, amongst other things. The Lonely Astronomer, 1954. Dr. Henry Brunner, brilliant astronomer, is found dead with his head battered in and with strangulation marks on his neck, leaving behind 4 suspects, all of whom had reason to hate him. Adam Quirk takes up the case. The denouement derives from Death at the Observatory, 1938 magazine stories. As I mentioned at the beginning, the first 5 novels appearing under the Gridban name were written by E.C. Tubb. Here we see the first of them, Alien Universe, Sky in 1952, cover by George Radcliffe. Reverse Universe, Skyen, 1952, cover by John Richards. De Bracy's Drug, Sky in 1953, cover by John Richards. Planetoid Disposals Limited, Milestone 1953, Fugitive of Time, milestone 1953. You can read all about them in my book, The Tall Adventurer, The Works of E.C. Tubb. Bear with me. There we are. Continued overleaf. The remaining synopsis of the planet. And there we are.